Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, and I'm super pumped to have the one and only Phil Harvey coming in hot on the show today. He's the founder and CEO of Sabre56, the leading hosting provider and digital asset mining consultant. Is a cryptocurrency mining expert. Phil has been active in the space since 2014. Wow, coming up on 10 years. That is bananas. With a background in military operational planning, he has been devising solutions for the most complex problems facing blockchain companies for years, including growing one of the largest miners on the North American market. Sabre56 today has consulted on over 700 megawatts, I believe that's megawatts, of computing power across North America, the Nordics, and the Middle East. And the company also builds and operates the most technologically advanced blockchain data centers and acts as a trusted hosting partner for leading miners globally. Phil, pumped to have you on. Welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for the intro, Matt. Appreciate it.
Pumped to have you on, man. Before we get into Sabre56, let's jump right into Phil here. The star of the show. I'm a big military guy. It's hypocritical of me as I've never been in the military. And I love it. I have, friends and family in the military in Canada, friends and family in the military in the States. Don't actually know anyone who is in the British military, but now I know you. So we got all the countries covered. Walk me through some military stories, childhood, Phil's journey from a little British lad to the CEO of Sabre56. Give me the whole TLDR. What happened from Phil as a young lad all the way up to present day? And I'd love if you could touch on some military stories while you go on that spiel.
Yeah, sure. I'd say I was always one for trying something and pushing the envelope, as if it were. So I worked in a warehouse when I was a kid at school. So Wednesdays and Thursday evenings, I'd finish school, then go work till 8, 9 o'clock in the warehouse, and then continued on the weekend. I assume mum and dad thought I was going to be just working in the warehouse for the end of my days, which of course there's nothing wrong with that. They just expected me to do something else. I wouldn't say that I was showing huge levels of business or life acumen when I was at school. I wasn't really into it. I didn't have an aptitude for learning, and then joined the military. My both grandparents were in the military. We had national service back at that time. So they would be, telling war stories and how it was a great time and I should go and so on and so forth. And I recall watching the news, and it was Desert Storm, it must have been at the time. And I remember watching it with my grandfather, and there was some American soldier, all his gear on, kicking a door down, helicopters in the background, like real boy shit. And I was like, okay, good. Yeah. So I saw that and I was like completely brainwashed. I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. The reality is it's tough. It's not, you don't see it on the TV and then you can go home at nighttime. There's a bit more to it. So I joined the military at 16. I did okay at school. I wasn't necessarily learned. I got by. And then following that, I was in Germany, and I specialized as a radio operator, a communicator. And through my loathing of PT, physical training, I ended up navigating having to do the PT to go and play rugby because it was an easier option. Little did I know the master training instructor had other plans. And he said, listen, if you're playing rugby, then you've got to move that and you've got to do PT. So I became exceptionally fit. I've always been pretty skinny and lean. So I was playing on the wing at rugby, lots of running around, then was doing PT at the same time. And through a series of events of application, I was put forward for UK Special Forces. And through successful application, was the youngest to pass at the age of 19, which I believe to this day still stands. And then ran around the world,
wow,
pretending to be a soldier. Went to Iraq, Afghanistan, and just learned a multitude of life skills. And it was incredible. If I were to restart the clock, I'd do everything again, exactly the same. It was phenomenal. But everything has to come to an end. I was tired of being told no. And I was ahead of my peers for promotion and wanted to do different jobs. And I just got tired of, next year. So I handed in my notice. I left and was in the civilian world. And it's a culture shock, having been clothed, fed, watered from 16 to 22, 23. Getting into the civilian world is is a rude awakening. You believe you've got it all together, and then you realize you've known nothing. So that was, you know, a big learning exercise. Very fortunate to have some great business mentors, even through failures. You know, I never look at anyone that traditionally did me wrong as you know, a bad person. You know, learn a plethora of lessons from everyone. Moved to Dubai maybe 10 or so years ago, and from there found Bitcoin through a very good friend of mine, Cam McDonald. Shout out to Mr. 150, and he told me go buy.
What's the name? What's the reason behind the nickname there, Mr. 150?
Mr. 150. I have no idea. It's probably because he likes to go 150 mile an hour everywhere. Yeah, he's a good guy. Apart from being Australian, but we can forgive that. So he said, listen, you got to get into this Dash, this dark coin as it was at the time, back in 2014. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I was working at a bank at the time, and I went on local Bitcoin. Went and transacted with some random crypto gentleman at the time. You know, put $1,000 into an account. No KYC, AML, due diligence, nothing. You know, just completely trusted some guy. And I think it was like 5 or 6 BTC at the time. And I was like, right, okay, yeah, you know, we'll move this because, of course, you know, back in 2014, BTC had already gone to the moon and it was already, you know, as high as it was going to go. So instantly sold out of that and bought Darkcoin, and inevitably that just disappeared into you know, many
the oblivion.
Stats at the time. Then Cam calls me back up about a year later in an absolute panic. He's like, bro, you've got to look at what's going on with Dash. I said, dude, I have no idea what Dash is. What are you talking about? And he's like, Darkcoin, it's now Dash, and this has happened, and blah, 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 blah. So reloaded the wallet, so on and so forth. And then that $1,000 had turned into $60,000. And then that obviously piqued my interest. So from... Then on it was, that was it. It was like, right, how do I get the next hit of this? So then was, you know, managing a few portfolios for guys, then went to Canada and built cryptocurrency mining farms, and you know, grew a couple of miners, and then moved and started Sabre.
I love that. What a great story to kick things off. Hey, fellow Canadian here. Where'd you go in Canada? I assume Quebec, most likely?
Yeah, a little bit. We had operations there, but I actually, base for me was Calgary, and then I spent some time in Toronto. But yeah, it was very beautiful to live there, just disappear into the mountains at the weekend. I was very fortunate to be able to spend a couple of years there. Yeah,
I mean, the west coast of Canada is a special place. So, I mean, that was a treat. Thank you for that, Phil. Let's jump right into Sabre56. Tell me about the company, and let's start off with the name. What's the name behind this? Because, you know, most of the time I get guests come on the pod and it's insert blocks here or crypto here or whatever. You know what I mean? It's pretty straightforward. You could at least picture in your mind, you have a good depiction of what the company name means. But Sabre56, I'm sitting here like, what the fuck is this? I have no clue what this could be. I love the name. It's catchy, but give us the lowdown. What exactly do you and the team do? And what's the vision behind the name?
Sure. So the reason for Sabre56 rather than Sabre56 is that was my call sign out in Iraq. So you would never pronounce it name numbers. You know, it was always Sabre56 for ease of recognition. Gotcha. So that's where it carried over, and a couple of my fellow partners were also in the military and shared the same or similar call signs on their operations, which is why also the call sign is or the logo is white on a black background, same as how we would wear it if we were to wear our target recognition flashes. So that's where the name comes from in terms of the company.
Very cool.
So when I was deployed in Canada, you know, building farms, we very quickly realized that, you know, by and large, there was no rule book to how farms were being built. They were very haphazard. They didn't follow policies or procedures or any kind of process. And as ex-military guys, we were indoctrinated to be, you know, follow the steps, achieve success. So it was disheartening to be in an industry that we were passionate about and see the disarray. You know, guys were being sued or just ultimately pissed off because the operations were just not to the level that was required. And look, it's fine in an emerging industry, I guess, up to a certain level as you're finding your feet. But, people were spending serious money, even during S9 times and then into the S17s. And there was no excuse for the facilities that were built at the time to be just, below standard and not following any kind of outline.
Can you touch on this for a sec? Like, for someone who's not in the arena like you are, what makes something up to standards or not? Was this just like a complete and utter banana land shit show, like unsafe, not efficient? Like, how is it not up to standards?
If you go into a clothing store and there's shit everywhere, the trainers on the rack are different sizes and shapes, and they're not together, and the t-shirts are thrown on the floor. I mean, yeah, you can go into the store and you can buy the clothes, but are you going to go into one that's got its shit together, or are you going to go into one that it looks like a fire sale? So, if we look at filters and fans, a lot of the facilities weren't running filters, and we're wondering why so many machines were having board issues or fan issues. Airflow wasn't modeled at all. Cable management, it's basic stuff. If you've got cables in front of machines, the airflow is going to be hindered, and therefore the operations uptime is going to be subpar. So it's just little things like this that weren't implemented, weren't being followed at all. And it just looked like, I would describe it as a bag of dicks, and it shouldn't do. So we set about trying to build farms that, looked legitimate and operated in that way. We are a company that has tier 1 operators in it, and we understand what's required in order to achieve success. And it's uncompromising. I mean, our company strapline is the unrelenting pursuit of excellence. And that's absolutely what we believe in. I mean, we are bred on that. So we saw a big gap in the market where we could deliver consulting services for miners wanting to enter the space, for us to build facilities. And very fortunate that the team is made up of leaders within projects, commercial and design management. The guys and girls have worked at very senior levels within extremely large consultancy and construction businesses globally and delivered hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects. So as a company, as you'd alluded to on the very kind introduction, we've consulted on projects globally, massing over 700 megawatts from design, build, and commercial engagement. And that was really our entry into the space. And the idea from there was to amass some cash, build a reputation, and communicate the right message to the industry that there is a pioneer, there is a leader within the space that has got their shit together and can deliver projects. So the next iteration for Sabre was then to build our own facilities and stand by our own code, and to showcase that this is the standard that you can expect to receive from Sabre. And anyone that sees us or recognizes the brand, it's always with hashtag the Sabre56 standard, and that's what we live by. So yeah, built our own facilities for hosting. We will only host due to any conflicts of interest between us and hosted entities. So no mining from a Sabre perspective. And we now obviously operate client sites, which was released a couple of months ago with the award of the 300 megawatt project down in Corpus Christi in partnership with Bootstrap and the Saxit project.
That's wild. One point I'd love to touch on is obviously what you concluded with, the location in Corpus Christi. Getting into the States for you guys was absolutely massive. Obviously, as a mining company with just the plethora of resources and people and energy and economy in the States, of course, this was massive. I'd love if you could walk me through how you guys actually got into the States and doing research for the show. Didn't know there was that much involved in sort of the landmark consulting and construction deals. Like, it makes total sense after reading about it, but as someone who's on the sidelines, it's like, you just whip it up and you're good to go. Like, it's like you buy the piece of property good, but there's so many complexities. I'd love if you could walk me through the shit show that it takes to get into the States and getting those landmark consulting, construction deals, blah, 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 the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there's a very intricate path to walk on, and to find a site, to conduct due diligence and feasibility on sites, understanding the requirements from the utility, the counties, the approving bodies, engineers and such. walking that all the way through into, the design, build, commercial, procurement arrangements, managing contractors. A lot of it, the team have delivered before in previous lives, so it wasn't a big stretch for them to consult on these projects. It was majority copy paste. But the more intricate elements, such as the utility and learning some of the language there and understanding what the requirements are to plug in from utility meets facility perspective. But again, we're educated guys and girls that have learned different backgrounds in the past, whether that be military or banking, environmental, whatever. So they're buzzwords that you learn and research, and it's not overly cumbersome or difficult. So we were able to navigate that path successfully. It took a number of attempts, and I'm sure our early clients were annoyed at some of the reasoning behind the process that we implemented, but we were also learning, and that's everyone needed to understand that. No one knew how to deliver these things. So we managed to consult on a number of projects in the US and Canada for a number of clients. And we've been known in the market. I was former CEO and COO for Phoenix. They've gone on to build large facilities now in Oman and Abu Dhabi, which I was involved on before I left. So I was known in the industry, obviously for the role I facilitated there. So once I started my own thing, it's the same contacts and connections and similar discussions, but letting the guys know that we were there to support them. And obviously one thing leads to another, and you put your strategy together, you get the guys on board, and then you go from building facilities for others to building facilities for yourself.
And what are some of the differences between building facilities in the US versus Canada or other spots? Or would it just be the obvious answers like zoning bylaws and construction bylaws and all that stuff? Is there any non-energy specific things? Because we'll get into energy on sort of the second half here, but are there any non-energy specific nuances that deal in certain countries versus others?
By and large, no, Matt. I mean, it's
same shit.
Yeah. Very similar. Yeah. There's only a few locations where we've seen minor deviation, but generally you once you've figured that process out, you can have the discussions. And that's not to say that once you have a process mapped out that it's a route to success. There's obviously a number of different tie-ins, and you're working with different entities all the time, different people, and they'll still follow a similar process, but different way of getting from A to B. So it's generally the same, and I feel comfortable in saying that. But there are obviously the usual nuances associated with working in different states or countries.
Of course, Phil, we got to take a quick break, and folks, we have to take a quick break. Give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, Prime XPT. And when we get back, we are going to talk energy usage 101 and the current state of the crypto, more specifically Bitcoin mining market. Who's entered the space? What do we have to look forward to, and what's going on right now? But until then, huge shout out to the one and only Prime XPT. We love this team at Prime XPT. They've been longtime friends of CryptoNews.com and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. Prime XPT offers a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XPT is also running an exclusive promotion for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. You get 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is 50% of your first deposit that will be credited to your trading account. The promo code is CryptoNews50. That's CryptoNews50, CryptoNews50, all one word, to take advantage of this offer and receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. And now back to the show with Phil. Phil, let's get into the fun stuff here. Everyone wants to know about the current state of the Bitcoin mining industry. Who's moved into the space over the last couple of years? Of course, we have the one and only halving, which I believe is March or April of 2024. I want to say we're 6 months away, give or take, which a lot of people just had Gracie Chen on the pod, the CEO of BitGet, and she is in the camp that the halving doesn't matter as much as it used to because, again, the halving matters less and less and less every single time. That's her point. A lot of people agree. Some people don't. Can't wait to get your opinion on this, but give us the TLDR. What is the current state of the mining industry? What players have moved into the space? Will the halving affect anything? Let's get into it.
The best response I ever received about halving was the last halving cycle. I was chatting with a facility operator, and he asked me a very similar question. What do you think about the halving? Gave my opinion at the time. I said, what about yourself? And his response legitimately was, I don't think it's going to happen, which is disturbing to say the least as a facility operator. So I don't know what he was smoking, but clearly it did happen, and it will continue to happen. So that's the initial response. The mining industry is fragile, I would suggest. There's been a lot of movement. There's been a lot of rushing into the space in previous years. And we saw that, unfortunately, with bankruptcy this year, last year, of some of the major players in the space. And I believe, unfortunately, that that's going to continue. Minor capitulation will be something that we will continue to experience over the next 6 to 12 months. And main factor for that is that everyone jumped on board buying machines at silly prices. They weren't building the infrastructure quick enough. The debt management was poor. And we still have clients now that have tens of thousands of machines that are sat in warehouses or were with bankrupt partners that weren't deployed and that need to be redeployed.
Wait, these machines still aren't redeployed? They're still just chilling?
There's still a large majority of machines that are not deployed yet.
Remember 2021 when people were just paying arms and legs to get a hold of these? Like, how are these not being put into use? Is there just not a need for it, or what's the deal there?
A couple of words I would use there is recklessness and stupidity. And that's
really it?
Unfortunately, that's the crux of it. There was a huge rush for buying a chunk of aluminum with some hash boards in it and not thinking about where you're going to put these things. I mean, we're not talking 5, 10 machines you can throw in the garage. It's tens of thousands of machines that listed entities and the like were rushing out to buy with zero idea about where to put them, how to facilitate that. And there was also some greedy players in the industry that, quote unquote, had space but didn't. And, they weren't able to put them online, which then impacted with penalties. And it was just a complete shit show. So, that really just accelerated a lot of issues that we saw. And unfortunately, that aftermath is still being seen across the industry. So to get back to it, the current state of the industry is fragile but stable. But I think there's also a lot of naivety and guys just hanging on, waiting to see. And there's also still a lot of hope, which is not a strategy at all for running a business, that, Bitcoin will increase. And it's just ludicrous that people still think that. Of course, it will increase over time. That's, how the network is designed, but it's not guaranteed and it takes time. If you look at the revenue at the moment, so if you look at hosting prices, if you look at what guys are paying for power, we can assume that with an S19 XP at the moment of, let's say, 4 cents, that guys are making 30 to 40% margin currently. That's not going to be enough post-halving for guys to continue making money. So we will see the same as we did in the last halving. Guys will continue to mine at risk until those that can't afford to pay slowly turn off. The other issue that we get into then is obviously the more efficient machines that are coming into the market, which is good. Efficiency increases are a positive. But that obviously bumps up the overall hash on the network more, which makes it harder for less efficient machines to make money. So that race continues. And if you don't have capital to deploy in order to buy the latest machines, you're going to struggle. And capital at the moment is extremely short in the market. There are a few players that have access to it, but there's a lot of waiting going on. And the more efficient miners that we're seeing on the market at the moment are the hydro and the immersion machines. And a lot of the facilities that have been built are air. So even to convert them, there's a big CapEx requirement that people don't already have, let alone to deploy hydro machines. So I would disagree with the comments that the halving is just another event, and that it's getting less and less important. It certainly is not. I'm certainly not here to be doom and gloom, but you've got to be realistic against this. And a lot of people aren't. So I've got no issues in saying it's going to be rough for the next, 12 months moving into and then out of the halving. And it's good. It's a good purge, and the industry needs it. And we should be looking forward to it. It should be a positive time for, the least efficient players and the guys that didn't pay attention at school to be moved out of the way.
Yeah, well said there. Have any big names moved into the space over the last 2 years? Because again, I want to say, when did the bull market end? End of 2021, early 2022? I mean, give or take, right? Like any big dogs jump in from during the bear market? Any big bear market dogs that are like, wow, just moving and grooving in the space?
We're under NDAs with various groups that we work with. What I can say that there's large hedge funds that are now moving in. So what we've seen from a market maturity perspective is initially you've got, the hobbyists move in and the mining. Then you've got a few of the entrepreneurial bankers or fund managers that were able to get some cash together and build some of the early mining farms and miners. From there, you got some institutional money that was looking in, dipping the toe in from the side and would invest in the soon to be or listed entities. And now what we're seeing in this next iteration is those companies taking over or starting their own. So they've kind of been, dipping the toe in, reviewing, and viewing from the sidelines. They're now getting in themselves. And we are seeing that institutional capital move into the space from real estate, hedge funds, large family offices, sovereign funds. And the industrialization of Bitcoin is well upon us. And I believe, unfortunately, that the retail mining is going to become a thing of the past, just natural market progression. And, as industrialization kicks in, it's sad, but it's inevitable.
It's the way she goes. It's like anything else in life. The bigger and badder you are, you'll come in and eventually grab some of the cake. Honestly, I think, look, yes, it's sad that the small guys and gals are getting knocked out, sure, but I'm all for this. If we want to really move the needle here, I'm all in for the big corps coming in. Phil, last thing we really need to get into is energy use as a whole. This is something that's way above my pay grade. Admittedly, I do need to do my homework in this regard. Of course, I obviously understand how Bitcoin mining works and all that, but the whole energy use stuff, like even when I'm reading the bio, I'm like, darn, I read over your bio a couple of times to make sure it was good before I read it. And then I get over the 700 MW and I'm like, is that million watts, megawatts? Like, how much is a megawatt? I gotta level my game up, fully admitting that. But walk me through the sort of present day energy use. How do we conceptualize Bitcoin's energy use, and how is computing infrastructure of the future going to affect, digital assets and renewable energy?
Big questions. Okay. Let's start.
Yeah, let's start with conceptualizing Bitcoin's energy use, because a lot of people still don't, myself included, still don't have a full understanding of like the X amount of megawatts that it takes to produce X amount of Bitcoin. I know it's obviously very nuanced and depends on where you are in the world and how cheap you get that electricity for, or that energy rather, whole 9 yards. But walk me through how all that works strictly in regards to Bitcoin.
So S9s, you could have a 5 megawatt facility back in the day, which would have been a large facility for S9s. And, they were producing or they require about 1,300 watts. So you would have had in there about 3,000 machines, 3,500 machines roughly, which would have been considerable. So if we look at, let's call it 3,500 machines, S9 was producing maybe 12 terahash. So that would have been 42 petahash, which is pitiful in today's, hash power for machines. So if you look at that 5,000 kilowatts or 5 megawatts at the moment, that's going to be, let's call it 1,500 machines. It's a little bit over, but 1,500 machines. And then let's use an S19 XP. That's going to be 210 petahash that you are now producing. So, in terms of an uplift, it's considerable. And that's what we've got to focus on when we look at efficiency. I mean, that's a 200% increase in efficiency from the S9 to the S19 in terms of the power draw that you can get from a facility. So
that's huge.
Yeah, one of the misconceptions or one of the common issues that we come across in the industry is, Bitcoin's consuming lots of power. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does. But don't compare it to a country, because there's a number of other industries that consume more power than a country. Review Bitcoin's energy usage against the banking sector, and you will see the blockchain network is hugely more efficient than the banking sector is. Yeah. Not only from a consumption perspective, one-to-one, but also from construction perspective. So these are the comparisons that we should be looking at. And once we are building large facilities, Riot's obviously building a 1 gigawatt, so 1,000 megawatt facility. The Saxit project, again, that we know is, 300 megawatts in Corpus Christi. And, then we've got Moonwalk in Oman, which again is couple of 100 megawatts, same with Phoenix in Oman and Phoenix in Abu Dhabi. These are hundreds of megawatts of facilities. We're following up on and chasing the data centers, traditional data centers, and the data centers use massive amounts of power. You would be blind and naive to think that we are not going through the digital evolution of our existence. And to be digital means to go online. Yeah. And if you're going to go online, you need infrastructure to support that. Bingo. Where's that going to come from? So, that's where we're heading at the moment. And, the reason why I noted the S9s at the start is that efficiency. So we are able to sustain the network in a smaller condensed allocation of power, even though we are growing. So there will become a point where we do reach equilibrium in terms of the amount of power that we need to allocate towards this, because the efficiency of the machines will increase to a level where we no longer need to expand into new facilities of power. And then after mass expansion comes refinement. And then it's looking at your operations and how you can make that more efficient. It's looking at the grids and looking at how we can, support the infrastructure of the grid, how we can, support the green initiative to not consume carbon or reduce the consumption of fossil-based fuels. But the other misconception is that, Bitcoin is bad for the environment and it uses fossil fuels. We connect to the same grid that everyone else does. So if that grid produces 90% coal, that means everyone that's connected to that grid is also using 90% coal. We don't go to the grid and say, hey, we only want fossil fuels. Yeah. We go to the grid and say, hey, what spare capacity do you have that you are not able to utilize? What can we take from you and pay for and support the economy in order to run our business? And if they say, hey, you can take this power, it's 90% coal, well, okay, it's not great. And thankfully, we are seeing, ESG strategies that are now focused heavily on not supporting 90% coal as an example. But in the same breath, if we're taking that power that the grid is producing and not using, we're increasing the revenue upstream. So we're increasing that for the economy and we're increasing that for the government and for the utility, which then goes back into the government's initiative for them going green. So if they weren't using 200, 300, 400 megawatts of power, and they now are, that's more revenue for them to accelerate their own requirements to turn down coal and turn down gas and go into hydro or nuclear or wind or solar. So you have to take a holistic view towards all of this and realize that it's not just one-dimensional, which is what a lot will unfortunately view it as, and it comes down to education.
Well said. Yeah, you got my head spinning on that last one. I mean, it's such a good point. All the Bitcoin haters, it's always one of the first things you hear about. Oh, terrible for the environment, blah, blah, blah. But like you said, I remember reading an article in 2021 where it was like dryers and washing machines consume infinitely more energy than Bitcoin mining does. It's like, are we going to go back to the 40s and 50s and start hanging up clothes on a clothesline and throwing our shit in a bucket and throwing in some soap and washing it? No, it's just something else to narc on. Phil, this has been an absolute treat of an episode, though. We are getting a little tight for time. We do need to wrap up. Last thing before that, this is a personal question from myself. Have you ever been told you look like Penn Badgley?
No, but if he's looking like me, then I suppose good for both of us, I guess.
So I didn't even know who he was until like 3 years ago. And then I'd be at a bar or I'd be wherever. And it's mostly girls because he's from this show called You. But I actually watched it with my ex just because she was like, you're in this. So they say I look a lot like him. And you and I look sort of similar, but you are a literally mirror image of the lad. Google him. His name is Penn Badgley. Now that I've shown you, it's probably going to be stuck in your head for a while, so I apologize. And I would also bet, if you want to do a little friendly bet, I'll bet you that in the next 6 months, someone will walk up to you and be like, you look like Penn Badgley. I'll bet the house on it.
Done. Okay.
So that's it. But before we go, Google him because I want to see your reaction. Penn Badgley. Check him out.
Okay.
Am I out to lunch or am I right here?
Let's see.
Pretty similar, dude. He's a good looking lad too. So it's a compliment, but you know what I mean? He's pretty similar.
Sure.
Twins.
If you want to agree with that, then that's fine. But yeah, I mean,
twins, man.
He can look like me rather than me look like him.
Yeah. Penn looks like you. There we go. But Phil, appreciate you coming on. Absolute pleasure. Learned a ton and definitely have some homework to do. And before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and Sabre56 online and on socials?
Sure. So you can find us the usual platforms. So LinkedIn and Instagram under Sabre56.
And yourself? You online anywhere?
I am a ghost. I only appear as the company. I'm away from social media and focusing on person-to-person interaction. Something I've done probably for the past 12 years.
Focusing on grinding. I love that. Phil, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Would love to have you and the team on for round 2. Wishing you guys all the best.
Sure.
And we'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Matt.
Folks, what an episode with Phil Harvey, founder and CEO of Sabre56. What a great episode on everything Bitcoin mining related, the current state of Bitcoin mining, the future of mining, energy usage, you name it. Phil covered it. Huge shout out to both of our teams for making this happen. To the listeners, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. If you enjoyed this one, and I hope you did, please do subscribe. Eustace, my amazing sound editor. You're the GOAT. Thank you. Appreciate you. And back to listeners, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Bye for now, and we'll talk soon.